All right, joining me now are two people on the front lines of educating the public about racial discrimination and social justice. Please welcome Agustin Arbulu, Executive Director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, and Dr. Jay Marks, a student engagement consultant for Oakland Schools. Both of you.
Thank you.
Welcome to American Black Show.
Thank you for having
me. So, as we could see there in the film, one of the concepts that we're really struggling with here, I think, is unconscious bias, not the things that that all of us sort of know we believe and harbor in our hearts, but the things that over time we've developed as ways of categorizing people or responding differently to people. Both of you work in places where you see a lot of that. I want you first to start telling us about what you see and just sort of how pervasive it is.
Well, first of all, you can't just talk about unconscious bias or these beliefs that sip in and create the situation. You also have to look at the structures, the institutions
that drive it.
That there's a co-creation that goes along. The laws, the policies, the norms that really create the outcome. And they're both feeding off each other, and you see it. And so what ends up happening is that the days of explicit biasness, we understand they're sort of leaving us behind. And now we have a different language. It's a code language that is created, and you sort of begin to pick it up. And when we start talking about immigration, what are we really saying?
Right. What is that code for?
Who are we really targeting when we talk about that? So those are things we have to watch for.
Yeah. Jay, you look at this in the context of schools. The very first place that as young people we go and sort of experience some of these things. Talking about privilege, when you are talking, some of your work is with teachers trying to get them to recognize those biases that they have. You talk to them about privilege and the way that privilege sort of sneaks into the culture without you really even thinking about it.
When we talk about privilege, too, privilege, I believe that most, if not all of us, have it in one area of our identities or not. Whether it's a part of our racial identity, language identity, religious identity, or the like. For example, I always use myself as an example. It's an African-American male growing up in Detroit. I grew up poor. So being a person of poverty, I experienced the levels of oppression via my poverty. Today, I guess I'm working to middle class, depending on what time of the month.
You're a teacher.
I'm a teacher, right? Class. So, by the time that check clears, I'm poor anyway, again. But it allows me certain privileges to live in and make a choice to live in a middle class community. But my racial identity, at 48 years old, almost 49 years old, relatively middle class, relatively educated, I still experience oppression. I still experience discrimination, racism, stereotypes, and the like. And what that does is it provides a consciousness for me, knowing that there's a part of my identity where I receive privilege, but there's a part of me, of my identity, where I'm oppressed. What privilege does, though, also, it could be empowering. Our colleague earlier talked about that very deep and sacred space of self-reflection. And when we allow ourselves to go there and identify our own areas of privilege, we can use that to empower us so that we can use our very own privilege to really strengthen institutions, to eradicate systems of oppression that take away the privileges from others. So, for example, as a middle-class person, if my middle-class status may oppress or discriminate against someone of poverty, I can use my middle-class privilege to eradicate those systems of oppression. A person who's white and has white privilege, once they go to that deep special space and say, you know what, I have some unearned merit, I have some unearned credit, I've achieved some things because of the color of my skin. How can I use that to eradicate systems that disenfranchise other people who experience discrimination because of the color of their skin?
Yeah. When you're talking to teachers in Oakland County where you teach, that's a place that's got a lot of change going on demographically, right?
Yes.
Cultural diversity means something really different in Oakland County today than it did 5 or 10 or certainly than 15 or 20 years ago.
Yes.
What do you hear from the teachers about the challenge they have, not just recognizing the diversity, but then recognizing privilege and bias to be able to sort of move it to the side and not have it affect what happens to these kids.
But again, it goes back to that initial step, again, of self-reflection, identifying, spending that time with myself and to think about the fact that I do have implicit bias. What happens is where this is dangerous if we don't take ourselves there, as toddlers, children begin to categorize things. Food, color, toys, people. And they do that by the color of skin as well. Yeah. By the age of 3 to 5, they begin to develop dispositions and biases about those things that they categorize. Yeah. Food, color, things, toys, people. By the age of 9 years old, they've developed a fixed mindset, a bias, that now is very difficult to reverse. By the age of 9 years old, that's 4th grade. So we need to be having these conversations at our homes as parents. We need to have these conversations in the classrooms at early ages, because what I often hear sometimes, because teachers are just unaware of the development and the psyche of children, sometimes even the children whom they teach, they think, well, my children, my kids, they're young, they get along, they don't see race. It doesn't matter to them.
They don't see color.
They see
How
it.
often do we hear that?
They, all the time. Yeah. They see it. They just have not developed a disposition about it at this point. Yeah. They like you. They say, I like Jay because Jay likes trucks. I like trucks, Jay likes trucks. Jay's my best friend. Yeah. I have not developed a disposition about Jay because of color of skin yet. By the age of 5 to 9 years old, they're developing it, and it's starting to stick.
Yeah. Agustin, go ahead.
I agree with what Jay's saying, but I think we have to also be aware that Oakland County, the suburbs, that's where problems can arise. Mm-hmm. Real problems, because police have not been trained. Sure. People of color, blacks, driving through a community like Birmingham.
Absolutely.
They're not accustomed to it. The police stops. The wrong move, an explosion happens. Right. I have concerns about that. Yes. And that kind of sensitivity we've got to really focus in on, and we've got to train the police, law enforcement, about those situations.
So do you get the sense that municipalities in Oakland County, governments in Oakland County are aware of this and open to the idea that they need to?
Well, you know how I do it? One of the things that the Michigan Department of Civil Rights does is we have what's called LPACs. They're advocates in law enforcement for community trust that we've sponsored. And we talk, the issues really are not with people who are interfacing with communities of color, the black community, the Muslim community, the Hispanic community. They tend to be in Detroit.
Yes.
Let's be real about that. Right. They're in Detroit. But let's talk about Bloomfield Hills, Grosse Pointe, Birmingham, the interaction. We need them at the table, and we have to have some honest dialogue there.
And you know, when you were talking earlier about the sort of absence of, or the relative absence of explicit bias and this sort of unconscious bias taking place, it seems to me that for the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, that's a tougher thing to deal with from a policy perspective or from an administrative perspective, because there's this sense that, well, that might not really exist.
Well, that's right. And so what you try to do is you try to bring different groups together and create a safe space to have difficult discussions surrounding race, where you don't have the media glaring at you, and given what's happened in the last 3 weeks, you can sort of emote. Yeah. All sides can
talk
emote
about the
and
things
talk about what's going
on. That might scare you, that you might not want to say.
Those are the difficult conversations, but we have to do it. We have to do it, and we have to find space, and you have to not pick up your material and then walk out. You have to stay through it and really listen, and little by little, when you create those that dialogue and that space, now you're creating relationships.
Jay, we've got about a minute left. I asked Kimberly Papillon this question too. I want to ask you, especially because you work in the schools, what's the thing you see that gives you hope that this is moving in the right direction?
One, our children. I do a lot of work with our children. There are student social justice clubs, diversity clubs for students from middle school to high school sprouting up all over the county. And they're talking, they're engaging. Matter of fact, folks, they're waiting on us. They're waiting on adults in their lives, their parents and the teachers to join them in the conversation, to engage, because they're ready. They're doing things. Another thing that gives me hope is colleagues. There's growing interest in the work. The work that I facilitate with educators in the county is around race, ethnicity, culture, diversity, equity, and social justice. People are interested in work. They're interested in having conversations. But the conversations aren't enough. We need to enact. There needs to be, the conversation needs to be followed by something. Each and every one of us has something that we can contribute. And if we recognize an injustice, there's something that each and every one of us can do. Right? We can't sit in silence and be bystanders. So our children give me hope. The conversations that I have on an intimate level, personal level, but as a whole group level, those things give me hope.
Yeah.
And I know that there are people who are passionate about really wanting to do something.
There's still, of course, a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do.
Thank you both for being here tonight.